This four-part series examines the historic treatment of Afro-Americans in the white-controlled commercial TV industry. Part 1, Blacks in White TV, traces the image of blacks from the early days of Toms, Pickaninnies.
But you got croquette here. Do eating them make you happy? Oh, Andy, that's croquet. It's a game played with polo ponies. Oh, yeah.
Fat Mammies.
My guardian angel has sure been loafing on the job.
And dim-witted coons.
We must be the first two people to set foot in here in years.
I sure hope we the same two people set foot out of here.
Oh, Willie, there's nothing to worry about or be nervous. Here, let me have the light.
Oh, you gonna take the light?
Let me have it. I'll slide over here.
To a golden age of respectability.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens...
And back to Toms, Pickaninnies, Fat Mammies, and dim-witted coons.
My beats are slamming. My beats are slamming from the rugged programming. My man Bob Marley, hey my man, I'm jamming. You can never touch my stamina while I'm ramming. The hip-hop crowd makes me rah, rah, rah. Other MCs got flipped with these, begging me for mercy. Gonna stop the music, please. No, cause I'm a pro. Back to the combo. Make a crowd say ho. Had a strip show. Represent. My name is A-Song. Keep calm. Rhymes got smoky, funky like the stink bomb. Boom. Blowing up niggas, man. Put it in the trigger. So you better run for cover. Niggas gotta loosen their ass. Felt the glass. A 40-ounce bottle. Yo, yo, yo. Money, yo, bass. I swear to lies. Is he gonna live down? No, the nigga died. The maximum of MCs are populating. The minimum of those MCs are dominating. They're all in together now. True. What, who? Rhymes come stinking like a girl's poo-poo.
Hip her to the hopper and you just don't stop her. Hip her to the hopper and you just don't stop her.
Oh shit, here I go once again. Rhyme gets shitty from the time that I spend. I come old like Toe Fungus mode. That's my grandpa, pop, dude, give me show. Then I came with that old Al Green shit. Say that, taught me the ballistic. I get you blurry in your eye with the high note down to the Bronzeville. Oops, you got smoke. The shit I'm dropping is sticking up your area, but I shoot it through like a messenger carrier. I keep my breath smelling like shit so I can get funky. Baby, I'm not having it.
Hip her to the hopper and you just don't stop her. Hip her to the hopper and you just don't stop her. Hip her to the hopper and you just don't stop her. Hip her to the hopper and you just don't stop her.
In Part 2 of the series, Goodbye, Sergeant Ross, is the question. But the larger issue is the lack of power of so-called black TV stars. A media coalition charges that the male lead in Private Benjamin is being shoved out of the series and his job.
My name is Sergeant L.C. Ross.
Is Hal Williams' portrayal of Sergeant Ross too strong for white-controlled television?
For a black actor to go on the line and complain, I should keep my big mouth shut. As a matter of fact, just last week, I had several close friends of mine tell me that I should be very careful what I say to you on camera.
In Part 3, Black Soap, you can ask about that rascal Jesse's problems in Pine Valley, Dee Dee Bannister's in Monticello, and Henrietta's affair with that handsome Ed Harding in Bay City.
It's been a long time since I felt like a woman.
It's been a long time for me, too, Henrietta. Too long.
Will blacks find happiness in soaps? Is TV off color? Is part 4. 65% of blacks consider themselves as unfairly treated by TV news, an exclusive TV Guide survey found.
I think that the footing we thought we'd gained in the past decade isn't as substantial as we'd hoped it would be. I was always fearful of that.
I have no answer, because I've seen the representation of black people on all the series television as diminishing over the past 3 years. It's just gone from a few people to not too many, except for the comedies. And, well, they need a lot of work.
Are blacks left out because they're incompetent?
White incompetency has been the rule rather than the exception. So I'm saying now we have a lot of black and Hispanic incompetence here. So why can't our incompetence work with your incompetence at that level?
And what are blacks doing about their media problems, if anything?
It is undeniable that black Americans are becoming increasingly more concerned about the images that are projected about black people in the movies and on television.
We're not going to make promises we can't keep. But in the name of God and justice, we're not going to let people continue to trample on us as they have in the past.
After more than 3 decades of television and black involvement with the medium, our image still adds up to this. As sports announcers are now saying, let's go to the videotape. But if you're black, what do you see? I'm Tony Brown. In a moment, blacks in white TV. First, there is the perception of what TV is all about. An exclusive nationwide TV Guide survey conducted by Opinion Research Corporation found that blacks, along with women, more so than other groups, had very strong preferences. This might suggest that these groups are more emotionally involved with TV than other groups. And of that 56% of Americans who depend on TV as their chief source of information, the TV Guide survey found that blacks are even more dependent than whites. Furthermore, the study showed that 65% of blacks consider themselves as unfairly treated. But don't just take blacks' word for it. A quarter of all Americans perceive ethnic or racial bias in TV reporting, and 40% of that group identifies blacks as the most mistreated. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights in a recent report warned that the roles of blacks in TV situation comedies largely fixes an image in the public mind as a ridiculous and non-serious people. TV is a force so new in our socialization process that we're still trying to measure its impact. In all honesty, nobody really knows exactly what TV has done or is doing to our society. But there are some things that we do know. It would be difficult to underestimate the influence of television on the American public. As evidence, there are the numbers, the awesome numbers. For example, 98% of all homes have television sets, and the average home watches over 6 hours a day. The average 18-year-old has watched 22,000 hours of television as compared to attending only 11,000 hours of school. Seen 350,000 commercials. Blacks as a whole watch about 10% more television than the general population and are more frequent viewers of non-prime time television than whites. On the basis of 30 years of available research in Blacks in Television, a review of the research literature published in the Journal of Broadcasting, the following picture of social learning comes into focus. Blacks are more likely than whites to use television as a source of information when buying a product. Blacks most often turn to television rather than newspapers or other people for news of the black community. Black adults prefer programs which feature blacks. Blacks perceive television as representative of real life more so than whites. Black children learn aggressive behavior from TV role models, and they are more likely to imitate a white role model than a black one. Black adolescents are more likely than whites to use television to learn how to behave with the opposite sex and to develop codes of social conduct. This includes most of what they know about jobs and problem solving. As well as being heavy users of television, blacks are also linked to it by history. This historic relationship between blacks and TV is documented in the first book-length study of the subject, Blacks and White TV, by Dr. J. Fred McDonald, professor of history at Northeastern Illinois University. Blacks and white TV. What point do you make in your book?
Well, I think the most important point to make is that in the long run, American television has been discriminatory toward American blacks. It's perhaps not a novel idea because the motion pictures, radio, literature, and of course the laws and the whole history of the country coincide with that type of discrimination. But on television, there was a time when it moved from total exclusion to a widespread general acceptance, what I like to call, relatively speaking, a golden age for blacks on television. But since the late 1960s, the medium and the nation has moved away from its commitment toward fairness, and blacks are now more stereotyped than ever.
The image that blacks get of themselves from television didn't just happen. Its roots, as a matter of fact, go back long before the advent of the medium of TV. In fact, early TV was almost colorblind. TV blacks at that time thought could and would reverse the centuries of unjust ridicule and distortion. Did TV miss the boat? The answer to that question has to be a categorical no. TV has made tremendous strides in bettering the condition of Afro-Americans, and there is a discernible trend toward a more progressive treatment of blacks. But if you ask, has TV matched performance with potential in understanding its responsibility to project undistorted, honest information as a cure to the legacy of racism, the answer is another categorical no. To understand the history of television and its association with American blacks, Dr. McDonald has divided the record into 3 distinct time periods. What were the early days of television like?
Those were exciting days, Tony, because TV was born in the late 40s, in the sense that it became a popular medium. It was a period just after the war where we had fought a racist enemy. The Nazis were race superiority personified, and we know in the Holocaust what a horrible experience racism was in Germany. So this country had still was flush with the spirit of equality and freedom. We aren't like they are. We're not a racist country. So it was a great period of liberal reform. We find that in movies and literature, and the country seemed like it was going to become more equitable than ever. TV is born in this atmosphere, and we find that the promise of a color bias, or a no color bias, a promise of colorblind TV. It was a promise that, to a degree, was becoming fulfilled even into the early 1950s. As in many instances, black singers and dancers were the predominant black representation on television. But they were presented maturely, they were presented very often.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Diane Carroll.
Well, of me, light sleeping.
Typical of the presentation of new, young black talent, as well as older, more established talent in the bias-free, colorblind, early phases of television, was Diane Carroll's national TV debut on the Eddie Fisher Show. Here was a new young talent just making her way on Broadway, and all of a sudden television, with its unbiased image, was giving her national exposure. And of course, we know what would come later, a fabulous career and the greatest of successes. We find in the rhetoric of certain shows an equality, a sense of freedom. But ironically, the most important, or the most popular programs with the national audience still were those shows that were rooted in the minstrel shows. Shows like Beulah, for instance, which gave us the black maid, the black mammy.
Beulah, if marriages are made in heaven, my guardian angel has sure been loafing on the job.
Actors like Willie Best, who appeared on several different programs, including the Stu Irwin Show. He did the same kind of coon role that minstrel shows had made so popular at the turn of the century.
Never saw such a neglected place. We must be the first 2 people to set foot in here in years.
I sure hope we the same 2 people set foot out of here.
Oh, Willie, there's nothing to worry about or be nervous. Here, let me have the light.
Oh, you gonna take the light?
Let me have it. I'll throw it over here.
I wouldn't be caught dead in this place. What am I saying?
And of course, Amos and Andy, the number 13 show of the 1951-52 season.
But you got croquet here. Do eating them make you happy? Oh, Andy, that's croquet. It's a game played with four opponents. Oh, yeah.
Those shows suggested early on TV that the country really hadn't abandoned its predilection for racist imagery, for the pictures, for the graphic illustrations of blacks as subordinate inferiors within the society. Remember, the same people that were running television were running radio for 30 years before that. NBC, CBS, ABC. They had been quite successful with Beulah on radio, certainly successful with Amos and Andy on radio. And when they brought those stereotypes over into television, and the ratings showed that the mass audience preferred them to more serious portrayals of blacks, it was inevitable that you begin to pare away, black singers and dancers and performers, no more Billy Daniels show, no more Nat King Cole show, and you begin to emphasize the more pejorative stereotypes.
I come a long, 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 long way to take you in my arms. And now is your first move to prove that you've been true. Come to baby.
I think the Nat King Cole show, with its failure by the end of 1957, it had run a year, it was tried to be nurtured, but it didn't make it. That clearly signifies the end of a first period where the promise is gone. No longer do we try to live up to the promise of colorblind, bias-free programming, the promise that was there in 1948. And as we enter a second period, beginning in the late 1950s, blacks have been practically excluded from television. Even before that, in the case of Paul Robeson, the great black liberal reformer, television showed that it didn't have any room for radical black positions. No politics, no black with great international power and prestige who was going to get on television if he represented anything other than approval of the system the way it is. Because if we're talking particularly about national television, again, the same motive is there. No sponsor wants his product identified in the civil rights movement with black programming. Beginning in the late 1950s, if we start from practical exclusion, up until the end of the 1960s at about 1970, we have a period that is strongly related to the politics of the time, and particularly to the civil rights movement. And as such, we can trace a pattern moving from exclusion to what I call a golden age, relatively speaking, of blacks on television. By the 1970 season, the beginning of the 70 season, there were something like 19 major programs in which blacks not only were in important secondary roles, but in many cases it was their show. That kind of movement, evolution, represented a positive drift toward that promise. But of course it was tied up particularly to the politics of the 1960s, and particularly to the reformist, liberal energies of John F. Kennedy, and particularly Lyndon Johnson. The New Frontier, the Great Society, strongly influenced the type of television programming that we saw in that decade. As television began to give more and more coverage to the black social crusade, television also began to give more and more opportunity to black dramatic and otherwise talent. That has a lot to do with the energies of the presidency. One of the themes that really strikes me in this study is how related to politics, practical politics, our television programming is.
We're moving to the land of freedom. Yes, sir. I know you're asking today, how long will it take?
Why did television become so enamored with Martin Luther King?
He was great television. He was articulate, he was handsome, he was a dynamic, charismatic character, and television, loves images. He was a perfect image for television.
Because truth crushed earth will rise again.
But, more importantly, he was moderate. He was a man of the cloth, a religious leader. He wasn't a Malcolm X. Malcolm X scared people.
You are gathered here this afternoon to hear the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's message, which you knew in advance was titled Separation or Death.
Malcolm X came out of the same experience as King. Malcolm X was a radical response to racism and prejudice. but he also out of religious background. But we don't find that in King. King is an acceptable reformer.
Shown us how integration won't work. Since 7 years have passed since the Supreme Court issued the desegregation decision, we only have 6% compliance with that Supreme Court law up at this moment. 6% in 7 years. Less than 1% per year. And these Negro leaders still walking around here thinking the white man is going to bring about integration.
But television covered the civil rights movement because it was happening. It was news. It was dramatic television. It was visually responded to by audiences. And those images, if you can think back, the savagery of police dogs being let loose on citizens, chewing their flesh and ripping their clothing, that makes for dramatic television. Fire hoses turned on people. Other innocent people marching and chanting for something as bold as freedom. Something that white Americans accepted as their natural, God-given national right. Blacks had to chant and sit in and demonstrate and eventually riot for. This panicked lots of American whites, and it is most clearly demonstrated in the elections of 1968. Richard M. Nixon, discredited in the 1962 governor elections in California. You won't have Nixon to kick around anymore, period. He becomes the president. Why? Because he promises law and order. Because he talks about middle America, by which he meant white America. Because he stands for what many people perceive is a reaction to the liberalism of Kennedy and Johnson.
And then around 1970, when we went into the third or the current phase, what happened then?
Well, I think if we focus on the Flip Wilson show, we can see what happened in a microcosm. Geraldine is one step above a hooker. The Reverend Leroy mocks black religion. Flip Wilson deals mostly in race humor. Flip Wilson brings back the disparaging racial stereotypes. I think his is a transition show from the more noble images of the late 60s into race humor, or if you want, into an age of the new minstrelsy, where the old minstrel images come back. New clothes now, liberal producers put them out, but they're still drawn from the minstrel show images. Good Times has a JJ, is basically the doltish coon type image that harkens back to Amos and Andy's Kingfish, that harkens back to Tambo and Bones of the 19th century. We begin to see new little pickaninny images. Gary Coleman, as sweet and precocious as he is on television, still is right out of the camp that gave us Buckwheat and Stymie and Farina on the old Little Rascals or Our Gang comedies. The age of the new minstrelsy, that's the third period. And although certainly there are more blacks on television than ever before, they are still pegged in those old racist stereotypes for the most part. And that is what makes me conclude that this third or contemporary period is the most savage of all, because we have drunk of the water of equality somewhat in that golden age. We have seen in the late 60s what kind of good craftsmanship can come out of black entertainers being treated as equals. And we've reverted back to the old images in comedies, in secondary roles, in subordinate roles throughout the 1970s and even into the 1980s. One of the most controversial shows, ironically, was Julia. In the late 1960s, it was a very popular show with Diane Carroll as a widow with a young son and a professional job as a nurse. But many blacks attacked it as being unrealistic. She was too assimilated. And she herself referred to herself as the white negress in the image that she was being asked to play on television. Nonetheless, I think it was an excellent program in the sense that it was a black person in the starring role of her own program. The comedy wasn't demeaning. It certainly didn't have minstrel show roots. And in that regard, I rate it as one of the better programs in the history of television. I think we can talk about some heroes of the white community in early television. Men who had their own shows but still put their chin out in order to allow young black talent to appear on their shows. These men had to buck a lot of racist pressures from their sponsors, from hateful letters that came to them, and from other elements of the industry to still allow blacks to have a chance. Certainly Ed Sullivan did that, and he had to contend even with his major sponsor in order to allow blacks to appear consistently on his show. If you want to see the limits to which racism can take the white imagination, the program Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, a syndicated program in the middle 1950s, is the best example. Sheena is a peroxided blonde, statuesque white woman who runs around the jungle in a loincloth and is much more savvy than any of the black natives who live there. Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, is sort of a white Tarzan, and she is the great white mother, if you want, is, I think, one of the distortions, one of the grossest distortions of the racist imagination.
What you looking for here?
Hunani, Habakonini. Not understand Swahili.
It would be misleading to suggest that all is bad for blacks in TV. There has been a steady trend of an increased visibility of blacks. You will now see blacks in over 1/2 of the TV programs and 10% of the commercials. The portrayal of blacks is more glamorous, and more are seen as professionals in TV dramas. But although the trend is to portray blacks as law-abiding, industrious, and competent, these roles frequently are insignificant ones. The character behavior one study concluded, even when blacks played major roles, still conveyed stereotypical messages. For example, black females are still small on achievement and large on dominance and fatty tissue.
This kind of humor would be all right in a situation, I guess, where there was no mistake that blacks were treated equally. In a world where blacks were shown in positive drama roles, where black producers and directors were integrated into the system, this would just be considered funny. No more offensive than if a white man were making the joke about another white man. But that's not the case with American television. American television, reflective of the racist society, cannot really tolerate that type of imagery. And as a result, Flip Wilson perpetuates or re-establishes, redefines minstrel shows and their old stereotypic values. And right after Flip Wilson comes all of the Norman Lear product, which no matter how funny or whatever people may consider them to be, they still are liberals making the stereotypes instead of more reactionary elements making the stereotypes.
Why do they work? Why do so many people like them?
Because, and I think it was there in the early 50s with the popularity of Amos and Andy and Beulah and Willie Best in his programs, America has never really left its proclivity towards seeing black Americans in racist imagery. We are basically a racist nation, and the popularity of the Sanford and Son type of images, the popularity of Good Times, and the popularity of George Jefferson on the Jeffersons shows us continually that we haven't really left our racist roots.
Give it to you raw. Yeah, it's that old school shit, about 12 years old. Let's get physical, operate your brain to function. I remember the guards at the junction. Conjunction, what's your function? I summed it up as the ace on Sumption. Known on the microphone is crazy crucial. Dip below on the MC like you and doing you something. So step to the shit right now. Kicking on the yang in my goddamn town. Knowing it's pressure, a damn it's a deadly. Daredevil doing, cause I am the UN. I-U-U-E, funky, fast, funky, new, get hype. You motherfucking right, I do A-Sword. Break it down, sure, anytime. A serious, outstanding, never end the rhyme. Break down your shit, however you come. There's no one who can fuck with a son. I paralyze you, make you realize who. Most concerned with my goddamn crew. Quiet as kept, when I start any fucking riots. See, before you do it, my nigga, don't try it. For you to get close enough to my style, you have to travel miles and miles and miles to find a special rhyme like mine. You gotta look, you might even find it in the Brooklyn Zoo book. Killing the beat with all your might. I love a hip-hop strong, baby, I don't wanna be right. Wake up, what? You losing your head? You woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Juvenile flex in the heart, you say you're living large. You're the head nigga in charge. Yeah, I give it to you raw. I said I give it to you raw. I make song, baby, I'm the A song, baby. me. I'm a son, there's nothing phony about me. Steady of course, so hard to handle, whip it like a specialist. I write my own music that will make you dance, get drunk, or act wild. Ladies be saying, hey, hey, I love your style. Whether you're sober, yo, just behold the Casanova. Get chopped with the lawnmower. So get busy as A-Son perform. On and on, ladies scream my name, A-Son. That means God, A-Son. Girls were mentioned, repeated so much, it catch a throat infection. Yo, I relieve the ones who believe you're in the need of the God degree that I build on with style and finesse, keep MCs in check like a game of chess. So to the folks, come to my rehearsals. I look so good, I should be on the commercials on TV, like a television or live. I'm the A-Son most high. Use the key to start the ignition. Don't ever forget to consult the physician. Don't charge a cent of excellent active ingredients. It's A-Son's elements: fire, water, gold, earth, wood. Yo, do the knowledge because it is good. Enough to own the stuff, jumbo pack. Brother like A-Son, will never be attacked. About a nigga couldn't figure how to pull a gun trigger. I said, yo, get the fuck out of here. Yo, I can't remember all you niggas back in the day. Zulu Nation, you know what I'm saying? All you motherfuckers, man, I just wanna say I love you. I love you. You know what I'm saying? All you breakdancing niggas, freestyle popping. You know who's the baddest niggas? I ain't gonna say nothing. Y'all know who's the baddest niggas in that shit. You know? See, I was one of them niggas doing this shit for 17 years. And I just want to let all y'all MCs know all across the land.
Is TV off color? Is part 4. 65% of blacks consider themselves as unfairly treated by TV news, an exclusive TV Guide survey found.
I think that the footing we thought we'd gained in the past decade isn't as substantial as we'd hoped it would be. I was always fearful of that.
I have no answer, because I've seen the representation of black people on all the series television as diminishing over the past 3 years. It's just gone from a few people to not too many, except for the comedies. And, well, they need a lot of work.
Are blacks left out because they're incompetent?
White incompetency has been the rule rather than the exception. So I'm saying now we have a lot of black and Hispanic incompetence here. So why can't our incompetence work with your incompetence at that level?
And what are blacks doing about their media problems, if anything?
It is undeniable that black Americans are becoming increasingly more concerned about the images that are projected about black people in the movies and on television.
We're not going to make promises we can't keep. But in the name of God and justice, we're not going to let people continue to trample on us as they have in the past.
After more than 3 decades of television and black involvement with the medium, our image still adds up to this. Because of the concern for the plight of black people in television, both the NAACP and the National Urban League have taken steps to make the problem of the black image and lack of jobs for blacks in TV and movies top civil rights priorities. To respond to the lack of jobs for blacks, Benjamin Hooks, executive director of the NAACP, has announced a boycott of a still-to-be-specified Hollywood studio. He also threatens to expand the boycott to TV networks.
If you want to talk about economics, if you want to talk about inflation, if you want to talk about Federal Reserve banks, you go to the white folk. If you want to talk about singing and dancing and bucking winging, you turn to black people. Now that, to me, is almost deliberate, because I've seen it so much and so often that it can't be all accidental. And we're prepared to deal with Hollywood where it hurts.
The National Urban League presented a special forum called The Black Image in Motion Pictures and Television as part of its annual convention. I moderated the panel of distinguished actors, producers, and writers. And what came out of it is the undeniable fact that there is a growing consensus on the part of black Americans over the black image projected by the media, most notably by television and motion pictures. There was also a strong concern over the employment of blacks in the entertainment industry. John Jacob, the National Urban League president, made this comment.
It is also undeniable that black people are becoming increasingly concerned about the employment of blacks in that industry, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Out of that session, several clear conclusions emerged. First, many of the black people who work in the entertainment industry are disturbed over how the black image is projected and how the talents of blacks in the industry are not fully utilized, and in all too many instances are ignored.
And speaking of being ignored, a black media coalition in a Dear TV viewer letter charges that the black star of the hit situation comedy Private Benjamin has been literally written out of the series. It says that Williams's character, Sergeant Ross, may be too much of a strong-thinking black man for white-controlled television.
It's ironic that at the Urban League Convention in your media forum that Bob Guillaume made a statement that was very apropos. You know, I wanted to be funny without being a fool. And there have been attempts to make the character a buffoon. I created a very intelligent career serviceman who was very dedicated to the Army, who just happened to be in a comedic situation. And I don't want to be ashamed of anything I happen to look at on TV and see, you know, that I did and say, hey, that was not good. I'm ashamed of that. And other people have got to be ashamed for me also. I went on a cruise this summer, and I went to the Caribbean. I also took a vacation to Hawaii, and I traveled around the United States some this summer, too. The people that approach me only approach me as an artist, as a performer, as a character, you know, and predominantly they were white people, because there's a lot more white people in the United States than anything else. And those people came up to me, wanted autographs, wanted pictures, hold their babies, this, that, and all that kind of thing, because they liked what I do. And they didn't see me as a black guy. They saw me as the sergeant, you know, and they identify with what I do. I know the military identifies very strongly with me as a sergeant major of the United States Army, and they are more concerned about that image and what the producers have me doing on the show than about who Hal Williams is doing it. You know, and they've told me in the writing, within the confines of the writing, there were attempts to make the sergeant a buffoon. I resisted them as much as possible, especially if there were any indications that they were trying to make it somewhat ethnic.
What were some of the ethnic attempts made that you didn't care for?
Oh, there was an attempt to give me a wife. Naturally, she had to be fat and black and heavy-set, you know, stereotypical wife. And I do have to commend some of my coworkers who came to my defense and said, why couldn't he have a very attractive wife? Why does she have to be heavy-set? You know?
The writers are white.
Yes, the writers on our show are white, as they are on most of the television shows. I will say that in the few instances where writing staffs have had black writers on the staff, along with white writers, it has worked out to a much more beneficial situation for all concerned.
I remember a picture that was circulated, a publicity picture of you in a very masculine, positive, sergeant way with these two very beautiful ladies who happen to be white. Mm-hmm. Now, am I reading anything into the demise of Sergeant Ross and the appearance of a picture with two beautiful white women in which you look like you are in control of the situation?
I don't know if you are or not, but I have my own personal observations about the sudden demise of Sergeant Ross in the show and in this fall season. It seems to me that somebody somewhere noticed that this image might not be the best to project to the American TV audience, even though those kinds of pictures were on the fronts of numerous newspaper TV guides across the country. I mean, I cannot prove that somebody sat in an office one day and said, we got to cut that out. We have to stop that. We can't let this go on. But it seems to me that if I created a character that worked very well and contributed majorly to the success of one of the big box office smash movies of 1980 and 81 season, and that I took that on into television, into the series format, and proved that the three characters interspersed worked well in the relationships with each other, and that most of the places I go in this country and out of this country, people recognize me readily and compliment me on my work and what they like about the show and my interaction with those two ladies and the rest of the cast, that there's something wrong, because that spells dollars. And if nothing else, the networks and the studios recognize the dollar value of performers. That spells success to me and in their pockets. There has to be another reason then for them to suddenly drop that premise and that concept and delineate that character to being something that resembles a little more than a glorified extra or a bit player.
Or someone who has fewer lines than a chimp.
Yeah. The first episode of this season is called Astro Chimp, and there's a chimp in the show who had more to do than I did. The highest rated episode of the 26 that we did, as far as Nielsen rating on the air, on television, was an episode titled So Long, Sergeant Ross, and where I had decided to get out of the service and go into business with a friend of mine in Seattle, Washington. And that show garnered like a 12 in position on the national ratings. That was the first time we'd been up that high in the season.
Before you were literally written out or written into a smaller role, were you earning the commensurate salary with the other persons, particularly the principals?
Not the two main stars, no. What you have to remember is this is my 7th series, either in as a starring, co-starring, or a recurring feature player. I started out in That Girl, then I went to Sanford & Son, The Waltons, Harry O, On the Rocks, which is a series I starred in. And there is such a thing as quotes. And in this industry, I'm creating a taboo because you do not talk money in this industry. You never talk money. Not to outsiders nor among yourselves do you talk about how much you make a week and how much somebody else makes. So that with that kind of overview of the financial end of the thing and salaries and whatnot, it's very difficult for performers, especially black performers, to know what the traffic will bear. So you come into a situation and you say, oh, well, they're going to pay me $7,000 a week. Well, if your highest figure prior to that point has been $2,500 or $1,500, that's great. But if you work a year and you find out everybody else is making $25,000, then that's not so good.
And is that the parallel with you?
It's about that. You know, the stars in the show make about 3 times my salary. They don't know that, but I know it. My agent knows it. Business Affairs knows it. And the president of Warner Brothers knows it because I talked to him about it. And I was told that if the show, which is still considered a marginal show, it's not a big hit, even though everybody seems to like it. It's not a big hit rating-wise. If we get 26 shows with that 12 position, that the one episode that I was in, or was concerned mainly about, if we got 26 shows like that, we would be considered a big hit. But anyway, I went into the show feeling quite naively that because I know how good I am, I'm going to be so great in this show that I'm not going to have any problems after I've worked in it for a year, because everybody's going to appreciate my professionalism and everybody is going to recognize my talent and all of those good things we like to believe and now we all know have nothing to do with anything on the business side. So here I am talking to you, not to further my cause, but to help anybody else who comes after me, to make them aware of what to look for going into a series.
Isn't there another taboo? Isn't there a taboo that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing now? You shouldn't go public and tell people? But isn't there a taboo for blacks in particular that they should kind of take their blows and
Well, yeah, I think there's a kind of
an
unspoken thing that we should be grateful for the opportunity. We should be grateful to even be there. And in these perilous times when hardly nobody is working, black or white, for a black actor to go on the line and complain, I should keep my big mouth shut. As a matter of fact, just last week, I had several close friends of mine tell me that I should be very careful what I say to you on camera. So I want you to know I'm being very careful what I say to you. I just figure this way. I have been internally quite angry since June of this year.
Do you find your situation in this industry as a black actor unique?
I have to answer that in a couple of ways. I find that my particular situation may be unique in that I started out so high in the show, and that for no apparent reason, my participation in the show has been minimized. At any other time, if I was of another persuasion, I'm sure that would not be the case. I can't think of any time when that's ever happened before. If something
to a white actor,
yeah, to anybody, where they were doing really well, and then suddenly people decide to ignore that talent and say, there have been situations where a person wanted out of a series, so they've minimized the role and then killed them off, or had them leave and go off to New Jersey or someplace, to work in a factory or something like that, and get hit by a car. But I would say that what you want to know is how much power do blacks in situations that in other shows have. I would say that in this instance, most of them have more power than I've got, but they don't have the power that the public thinks they have, because the public only sees the end results. They see what comes up on screen every week, and they see your name up there, and they say, big star, big car, big money, big house on the hill. Not true. Person could be moonlighting in the post office at night, which I did the first 5 years of my career. Even when I was still on Sanford & Son, I was a postal clerk at night, midnight to 8:30. I'd leave work, change clothes, get my kids off of school, and run to the studio and tape Sanford. But, again, people like Bob Guillaume. He's one of the few people that has his own show, one of the few black performers that has his own show, Benson. The bulk of the black talent in Hollywood is a little more than hired hands. They work in periodic jobs on TV. If they get cast in a series, it's in a supporting capacity. Usually, if Cecily Tyson or Lou Gossett or someone of that name value is cast in something, then it's a movie of the week, or it's a Hallmark Theater or something, a special. But we're talking about the average, quote, working actor that the public thinks is a star. I don't think there are any black stars. And I say that, I've always said that, and I say it for a very specific reason. Stars control their destinies. Stars have network development contracts and all those kinds of things that can cause innovative changes in what happens to them and other people who come after them, that can employ people, put people to work, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And I don't know any black people at this point on TV that can do that. I don't know one. I don't think Bob Guillaume can do it. Now, when you interview him, he may prove me wrong, because I don't know Bob's circumstances. That's another thing about the Hollywood community. It's not a community because it's very spread out. Just the lay of the land in Los Angeles is so spread out that there's not a hub where we're all in constant contact with each other. I was talking with Esther Roll the other day about that very thing, that we've got to develop a network of communication where we're all in touch with each other. We only see each other at functions, and when you see all of the black community at a function, everybody's got something going. I got a movie working overseas. I got a pilot that's coming up. I'm writing this or I'm doing that, because nobody wants to say, hey, I don't have a thing going. I'm not working, and it's terrible.
I think on the panel that we had, the National Urban League panel in Los Angeles, Bob essentially agreed with you, and Roxy Roker specifically agreed with you when she said that black actors, and she was talking about her cast, had no control, that they didn't have any control over the script, and I think essentially those two agree with you. How many people, how many blacks in Hollywood are we talking about, and how many blacks in Hollywood are working?
That's rough, because it changes. There are new people coming into town all the time. I can safely say there's a couple of thousand blacks out there seeking work, available, and there's maybe 45, 50 working on a consistent basis, earning a living at acting. Most people have something else going in real estate or PR or insurance or doing something, other than working in TV. And you must also remember that television is the primary area for work for the black actors. I mean, for most people in Hollywood. It's not feature films. You can count, usually on one hand in a given season, how many blacks have been in meaningful roles in feature films. Most of our participation and most people earn their livings from television.
At one time, Madison Avenue had the opinion, which they no longer hold, that when you place the black in a situation, you would lose the white audience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that theory still hanging around somewhere? Is someone in these studios or some persons in these studios of the opinion that they have to downgrade blacks in these situations, do you believe, because they are afraid of offending the white audience?
No, I think, let me answer you this way. I think that number one, they've usually, most of the time, they've dealt with us in a comedic sense. And I think that stems from the fact that they don't take us seriously as a race of people. So that just spills over into the industry. The other thing is that when they have tried to do dramatic shows on television, they claim, other than Roots, that they have never done well rating-wise. And the consensus seems to be that white audiences won't watch a black dramatic show in large enough numbers to make it profitable to keep producing them. There was almost like a backlash that took place, that in the last 3 years, in the last 3 seasons, that there has been very little work for blacks. I mean, and part of that has to be honestly attributed to the fact that there were a lot of pressure groups who complained about black stereotypical characters on television. When we had all those black sitcoms on and when we had all those black exploitation movies, we raised a lot of hell about taking them off. And I don't think we should have raised so much hell about taking them off as I do feel that this should have been a great demand and a cry for them to take it deeper, to explore, expand on this thing.
In other words, you don't mind seeing a few black fools on TV as long as you can see some other kinds of black people also?
That's always been my belief. Yeah, because they can't do any of it without us, unless they're going to go back to blackface. I mean, so those roles are left up to the individual performers as to whether or not they want to do them. But the opportunity to work is my main concern.
Well, let's talk about that. What's left, speaking of left up to, what's left for Hal if Hal is going to assert his manliness, his blackness, and his right and his integrity in an industry that too many people believe don't look kindly upon people, black or white, who are actors or actresses who behave in that manner?
Well, I feel that the key to the whole thing, and that maybe what has happened in the last 3 seasons, is the key to our survival as artists, whether it's in this industry or one of our own, which, as I honestly believe, is what it takes to make us all successful and what will ultimately lead to our survival as artists. That we have to develop a network for ourselves. I think it's a travesty that in a city the size of Los Angeles, there's no black TV station. There's no outlet for the black talent that's there in that city. And the money is there, the wherewithal is there, the expertise is there. Why we don't do it is the thing. It's just like you pointed out to me that you would have liked to see some action come out of that Urban League Media Forum, a plan of action that can be implemented or should be implemented right now and be on its way to development. Now, I've talked to several people who are about trying to do that, whether we have to start out with low-budget films at, $50,000 or $100,000 or whatever and show them in high school gyms and church auditoriums. You got to develop your own network of distribution. This thing of standing in line and telling somebody, give me, that's not it. And we'll always be doing that. There's no reason, we have no excuse now for not having our own.
Hal, do you believe you did too good a job?
It's just that I just think that I did a hell of a job. But I did the same job that anybody would do given the opportunity. I mean, the role that I had is a very good role. And on national television, you're in everyone's living room. And I did what I would do in any role, whether on stage, television, or wherever, I always give my all, 100%. I don't know how to do it any other way. And that may have led to my detriment.